Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Purpose Partner Path podcast. I'm your host, Coach Wendy Gladney, the Purpose Partner. And as always, we are here to help women at crossroads take their next step so that they too can become unshakable and live their life with strategic grace. Today's conversation is powerful, and I think it's also very thoughtful and necessary because somewhere along the way, many women feel or they're taught that to lead, they must harden themselves. And that is not true. That we have to do certain things to be respected. That we must be sharp or hard. But no, that is not true. And that to succeed, we must be unyielding. Oh, come on. How come we have to be unyielding? That is not true. But what if leadership does not require us to be hard? What if strength and grace can coexist at the same time? What if kindness is not seen as weakness, but actually as strategy? Well, today we're talking about strategic grace in leadership. And I could not think of a better person, a better guest to have with this conversation than Kelly Hawkins Davis. So you know what we do? Go grab your cup of tea so we can get started.
Exhale, let go, and enjoy the purpose, partner.
Kelly Hawkins Davis is the managing partner for EKA, and she leads the firm's health initiatives team. She has served in distinguished roles in both public and private sectors, from advising senior officials at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to serving in the administration of former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa as executive director of the Commission on the Status of Women. Kelly has worked as an epidemiologist, I hope I got that right,
Epidemiologist, yes.
for Los
Perfect.
Angeles County. And she has served as COO of the National Health Foundation. She has led executive recruitment in health and human services. She serves on the boards of Coro, Southern California, and Climate Resolve. She is a Howard University graduate, holds a master's in public health from USC, is an American Marshall Memorial Fellow, and a graduate of Coro's Health Leadership Program. I tell you, if I didn't know that I was okay, I would feel so intimidated having her as my guest today. But beyond all her titles, Kelly is a thoughtful, grounded leader who understands that power does not require performance. It requires your presence. And she has presence. So Kelly, welcome to the show. So I know I just shared a bit about your professional accolades, but can you now share a little about the personal Kelly that we may not know?
Sure, absolutely. The personal Kelly is outgoing amongst friends and family, but oddly enough, can be somewhat of an introvert. I have learned to navigate through that and find comfort through the networks that I do have of within, either community or business settings. But people always laugh and they say, "You're an introvert. What are you talking about? You're shy when you don't know anyone in the room." No, my networking is intentional that I make sure I have someone else in the room. I am a wife, bonus mom, daughter, sister, friend. And as my younger cousins and my nephew would say, they are the person that I'm the person to call when you're in a pinch. I'm a golfer, which also really, I think, aligns with my persona of one being quiet, but also very strategic, right? And also serve, as you noted, on a number of boards, which help me really remember and center my why.
You know, it's interesting because I can see now that I've gotten to know you a little bit better, I do see the extrovert side of you of being kind. But I think I told you when I first met you, I was like, oh my, I better step back. I don't even know. Can I say anything? Oh my goodness, will she shake my hand? I really didn't know. And I said, huh, but the more I got to know you and everything, I said, oh, she's like that, bear, but the cuddly kind that ends up just loving you to death. So Kelly, when I hear the word strategic grace, I think of you now. That is part of how I
Thank you.
think of you. And so I want to ask you, what comes to mind for you, especially as a woman who has navigated high level public leadership spaces when you think of strategic grace?
Well, when I think of strategic grace, I think of the woman who modeled that so well for me, my siblings, and so many other women, which is my mother, Floyd Hawkins. She is the epitome of strategic grace. Before I even knew, before everyone had the tagline, give them grace, give them grace. She, from a young age, she was like, look, everyone is not coming from the same position you're coming from. You have to have some empathy. You've got to be kind. And I've just seen how she has navigated those paths, right? And so for me, strategic grace is really grounding oneself in empathy, and having some sense of understanding of where the individual might be coming from, but also the experience you're about to encounter, right? Because a lot of times it isn't just a person, it could be a room or an environment that you're trying to have strategic grace within. So that's definitely something that comes to mind. But also, I'm constantly reminded by my what is it, five male business partners, that I tend to have, a very strong emotional IQ. And I think that EQ is so important, and it helps us all, right, navigate the world in just a better space,
Yes.
where someone can lead with heart.
Mhm. I think that is, I mean, you used a couple of words that I think are just perfectly pin on and point on in terms of heart and empathy. So true. My grandmother was the first person that really modeled it for me, and she always used to say, be careful before if you've not walked in someone's shoes, how you judge them. And so for me, when I think about strategic grace, I think about being firm without being forceful, clear without being cruel, powerful without being pressured. So, in your journey in federal government, local government, nonprofit leadership, or even in your consulting world, did you ever feel pressure to be harder than what you naturally are?
Absolutely. And I've stumbled along the way of this area.
Obvious.
Have had multiple lessons around it. But I can confidently say that I am more comfortable now than I've ever been in stating my position and not having to over explain rationale, right? I think a lot of times we are coming from a position of, okay, we're the decision maker, we need to be firm. But to your point, you can be firm, kind, and not forceful. It's saying what you mean and meaning what you say. So also following up those words with actions that reiterate what your position is.
Mhm. I would have to agree with you because I know I've had some people sometimes when they see me and I'm talking to them, especially if I'm coaching them and we're in some serious conversations, and then later they'll say, "Did you slap me and I didn't realize it?"
Right,
Because
right.
it's and it's like I tell my children, it's not always what you say, but how you say it. So
Absolutely.
you can get your point across without having to be hard. But I think sometimes many women, and especially women of color, we're navigating so many unspoken expectations. And some of
Yes.
those expectations we put on ourselves, but sometimes we're told, oh, you're too soft. I mean, I've been told that you're too kind, you're too nice, and I'm like, really? Somebody can be too nice, but I hear that from time to time. And then I know sometimes people are told, oh, you're too strong. But have you ever heard anybody say, you know what, you're just right?
Right. Exactly. It's rare. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. But you've managed complex organizations, and I know that you have advised senior officials at the highest level. What have you learned about strength that doesn't require aggression?
Yeah. I would say strength without aggression is really a call for clarity in one's position and honesty, right? I think so many times a lot of leaders are looking to, well, I want to say this in a way that it lands right. Well, you better make sure it lands with the intended landing place and landing message, because a lot of times we're trying to sugarcoat what the issue is or the resolution is and not calling to the carpet. Okay, if we have a problem, let's be honest about it, right? If we know that this is going to be a tough conversation for someone to have,
Hmm.
let's help them understand why the person on the other end may not receive this well, right? Why there may be history there in terms of their interactions.
Hmm.
That it doesn't matter if, yes, as a collective, we agree this is what you should do, but are you the best messenger? Sometimes you're not the best messenger, and you have to be okay with that,
Yeah.
right? But again, that's coming from a place of honesty and clarity that sometimes I don't think we always want to acknowledge.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I you just gave me like so many things to just reflect on. But one thing is true, and I didn't think about that when I was kind of putting together some of my thoughts for today, and that is that it is so true that sometimes people can't receive the message because can't see past the messenger.
Mhm.
So you're right. We have to find out and figure out if you're the right person, but sometimes you have to be the person. So then you may have to redirect your message. I just want to
Yes.
say this clearly for our listeners. You do not have to abandon your humanity to access your authority. I mean, sometimes we always feel like we have to change. Now, we may have to redirect how we do certain things, but we don't have to
Right.
change,
Right.
who our core value is, because really that's why you're chosen to be in that position. And you can
Right.
be decisive and still be compassionate. You can
Absolutely.
correct without crushing someone's spirit. You can lead without losing yourself. And I think all of that falls under strategic grace.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So, Kelly, let's talk about something we don't often connect to leadership, and it's called forgiveness. You may know I have a nonprofit called Forgiving for Living. So I really do try to tie in forgiveness at different times because it's almost one of those words people have a hard time navigating. That when I bring it up, they go, "Oh, forgiveness," So not just forgiving others, but forgiving yourself. In
Yes.
high level leadership roles, mistakes will happen. Decisions carry weight. Pressure is constant. So let me ask you, how do you practice grace with yourself around forgiveness?
Yes. Well, first, I remind myself that I am not perfect. At one point had a colleague say, you need to be okay with knowing that you are not going to accomplish everything you set out to accomplish that day. I still struggle with that comment.
I
But
live by lists,
it's
so I
great.
understand.
Great. But I get it.
Hmm.
I think also just trying to remember the intentions behind my actions and give myself permission to make mistakes. But it can be, pretty difficult, which is why I think my support system is so critical. As yes, I can forgive myself, but part of that is you getting out of your own head, right? So who is surrounding you, right? Within my more immediate support system, my husband is there, constantly saying, you're doing a great job.
Hmm.
I came up in a household where they, as a young child, I called it over validating. However, it was something that I came to learn as an adult that everyone else did not receive, which was it wasn't, there were no participation awards in our household, be clear. But if you got a good grade on a test, okay, we're going to have a special meal tonight, you
Hmm.
know?
Hmm.
And so that type of source of affirmation coming from your closest supporters, I think is something that gets me through, right? So it is a balance between um, my husband, my family, but then also myself, knowing that I'm good with, okay, if I finish 90% of the work, great. Or you know what, with this client, I did not have the direct path to win that I wanted, but was it a no? Absolutely not. And that's what I constantly have to remind myself. It's was was it a no? And then if it was a no, being okay with it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, it's interesting. So again, you've got me writing, constantly picking up my pen and writing a note down. I liked how you talked about making sure you're clear about your intentions, because when our intentions are right, we have to leave the results to God. Um,
Yes.
Secondly, give yourself permission. I love that too, because sometimes we are our hardest critics. And then the support system, I call that my kitchen cabinet. And my husband's part of my kitchen cabinet. Sometimes I want him to stay in the kitchen, just stay over there, because he'll like, do you really want me to give you a whole critique of everything? And my husband is also a coach and all that too. So sometimes I'm like, okay, I got it. I understand, so
Right.
having that kitchen cabinet, the people you trust, the people that are not going to just be yes people to you. They're not going to just say
Yes.
what you want to hear, but what they know is best for you is so important. And then you have to just block out the rest of the noise, because there's
Hmm.
always going to be noise and people are going to always have their opinion. So I believe
Yes.
I believe that forgiveness is a form of sustainability, because if you cannot forgive yourself, you will burn out trying to prove who you are and that you're worthy. And if you cannot forgive others, you will exhaust yourself, because you'll be holding on to grudges
Right.
that will drain your leadership energy, because some people
Absolutely.
are just not worth it. They're not worth the
Nope.
energy. And I don't mean that to be mean or negative, but
No.
some people just aren't. And then strategic grace will tell us that we must address the issue, which is what you
Yes.
talked about. Then we must learn the lesson, and then we must release the resentment. So,
Mm.
Kelly, have you seen forgiveness in action within, say, some of your leadership environments, where maybe either you had to extend forgiveness, or you saw somebody else, another leader who did it, and it changed the whole dynamic?
Yes, I have seen it. I've seen it within, smaller firm environments. I've seen it, in a government setting. I think, again, it comes back to people being honest, right? Because the only way that we can forgive is when we believe that someone is coming forward with their honest ask for forgiveness, right? And I think when people hear that sincerity, they're able to say, okay, it's one of those things. I'll forgive, but I'm not going to forget. Well, okay. But how do we navigate, right? How do we navigate? But I think it's also helpful for others to observe that forgiveness within leadership environments, because what it does, it also translates then to others' perspectives on that particular relationship or that engagement, right?
Hmm.
How people interact with each other can be so contagious, or it can become a cancer, right? And so I choose to foster environments that are contagious of good energy, collaboration, where the teams really feel like they can support each other.
A couple of things. One, I was going to say, when you see forgiveness in action, it's leadership in action. Because
Yes.
it is something that people struggle with. The other thing, when you were mentioning about, I'll forgive, but I don't know about forgetting. I have a 10-step thing that I talk about forgiveness, and I call that the difference between pardon and parole. When you pardon someone, it's as if it never happened. Now, of course, the offense still is there, but the way that you'll treat that person moving forward. Whereas when you parole them, that's like when we were in high school and the girl just said something bad about us, and then you say, well, I'll forgive her, but if she says that again, I'm gonna slap her, or whatever.
Right.
What I mean? So it's
Right.
the difference between pardon and parole. So let's shift and talk
Yes.
a little bit about the power of what I call the little things that are not so little. I believe in them. They're the power of etiquette. And those thank you notes. And I know you know that. The acknowledging support staff, remembering
Yes.
people's names. My husband always says that the three words in the world that people always love is mother, home, and their name. So when people
Hmm.
remember their names, it's important. And then when
Right.
people follow up. So Kelly,
Yes.
yeah, I heard that. I know. I'm frustrated when people don't follow up. It just bothers me. But Kelly, you have operated, as we know, as we've always been saying on this show today, at very high levels. And I know you. And I know you are thoughtful in the areas that we just mentioned. But why do you feel that these details still matter today?
Aside from, I think, my grandmother and her siblings keeping Hallmark in business, um, and the action of sending a card does remind me of
Yeah.
them. But it's how one feels when they receive either, whether it's the note, it could be flowers, it could be a gift of gratitude, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's a lost art. That's why also it means so much to people.
Yes. Yeah.
It is what separates the average person from, the rest of the crowd.
Right. Yeah. The cream rises.
And I think it's so easy for us to type up an email or send a text, right? But the act of physically getting a pin out, finding a card, getting an envelope, finding a stamp. I mean, everything's changing as we think about how messages are delivered, right?
Right.
Um, and I think our younger generation probably is looking at it as, well, is it more professional to send an email rather than sending a note? Because some of them may not have even come up in a time when we were doing handwriting,
I
right?
know.
So that is why it's so important. And I always try to impart that wisdom on newer workers to the workforce, so that they remember, like, hey, even if it's you say I have horrible handwriting, well, then type it out, ta print out that piece of paper and cut it out and glue it on that
No,
card,
I
right?
I've
But
actually had
put the
people
effort in.
do that because they told me their handwriting wasn't good. But you're right, because the little things aren't little and they're signals. And that's kind of one of the things you're saying. They're signals. Like a handwritten note says, I see you.
Right.
And a timely follow up says, you matter. And when we do it with a respectful tone, it helps people have dignity. And
Yes.
it also adds to positive conversation. Because people say, "Did you know, like so and so did so and so or whatever." It brings smiles, and and leadership is not just a vision. It's not just a vibration. It's an energy that you bring to the room, and when you leave the room, when people think of you, like Kelly's here, because you left an impression that was positive that made them feel like they mattered. And so when you walk into a room and then you leave a room, what type of energy or what message are you trying to make sure that is clear?
Absolutely. So I want to leave a reverberation of the energy I brought in, which is why I think it is so important for you to, before you're walking into a room, think about, right? Because I think people forget how powerful one's energy and aura is, right?
So,
And they're just like, oh, I've had a crappy morning, and they may start the conversation off with that tone, right? And you forget that depending on where you are in the day, that may be the first thing that person is hearing,
right,
and that's what sticks with them the rest of the day in
right,
terms of their mood,
right,
right? So how do we keep the vibration high and just remember, like, hey, people could be hanging on to every single word I say, whether it's a career day that I'm with students or I'm with staff or I'm with my business partners and they're looking for me to give some type of direction as it relates to the firm. I have to remember that. So I'm looking to make sure my energy matches the moment.
it's kind of like what we all have heard from Maya Angelou. Like people may forget what you've said, what you've done, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
So,
And
yep,
that's really really what you are sharing is that vibration of how someone feels when you walk in a room. And we've all felt people that when they walk in the room, we want to go to the other side of the room. Versus we the people that when they walk in, we're trying to like get over their I want a little some of that. I want a little some of that. I just want to touch her. I just want to hold her. And so let me ask you this. When you've been in rooms with high stake people, when the stakes are high with different things, how do you make sure Kelly stays grounded?
remind myself that I don't need to be the biggest personality in the room. I also, you know, this has been an interesting path for me, right? I never thought I'd be a young Black girl lobbying and running a largest lobbying firm in LA. I have to remember that I've already made it. So I don't have anything to prove except for I'm listening to you, right? That's what I have to prove to the folks around the table. And I think as it relates to the previous roles that I've held with the federal government, even local government, even still,
Mm-hmm.
I think what helped me get through those moments was understanding, hey, the job that you have is the job that you were made for in this moment. Be okay with it.
Right.
If there is an opportunity for you to ask those questions, you'll ask the question, you'll be prepared. I'm not a fan of people that basically echo what the other person says in the room. I'm like, let's keep this meeting going. we do, as long as I'm saying yes, I don't have any other questions, or yes, I agree with this approach. That's
Mm-hmm.
enough.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to repeat the exact same thing that your colleague said.
Just to hear your voice, that part.
And
So,
that's, both, I think men and women
yep.
struggle with this, right?
I agree because sometimes we want to feel like we got to say something to show that we belong where we are. But I think when you said you don't have to prove anything, and when you are grounded and centered in knowing who you are and why you are where you are, and then for those of us, because for me, I'm a Christian and I understand where, how my faith grounds me. We don't have anything that we're trying to prove to other people other than you matter. Like you said, you're in that room. I'm listening to you. I hear you. And what I've also learned is that strategic grace is not passive, it's a disciplined composure. And that's kind of what you're talking about, just being disciplined, being composed. It's knowing when to speak, knowing when to pause, knowing when to write that thank you note,
Right.
knowing when to apologize, when to stand firm, and just really always remembering that grace is not about being weak. It is an emotional intelligence in motion. And I had to tell you, I had to put that little tidbit in there because of you, because I know you do so well with EQ. But it's an emotional intelligence in motion. So for the women listening, who may be at a crossroad, maybe stepping into leadership for the very first time or recovering from a hard leadership season, Kelly, what would you tell her right now? What would you say to her?
Embrace your authenticity. Be yourself. Build those strong relationships within your organization, but also around your organization. You
Mm-hmm.
want that buffer, but to your point, that kitchen cabinet that can say, this is great. Actually, have you thought about doing this a little differently? Right. And stay resilient, because being a leader, it is not for the faint of heart, as we've seen many of our leaders struggle over the years.
Yes.
And lead by example, advocate for yourself. And I know people struggle with the statement of work life balance. I do think you can have a level of work life balance.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is it may not literally be balance. The whole point is make sure you are working, yes, but that you're making time for yourself.
Yes.
So at
And
the top of my day, I have, a trainer that is blocked off on that work calendar. Period.
I love it. I love it. And basically, it just requires us being aware of ourselves and not being harsh with ourselves or anyone else. And like you said, don't give up, have resilience, be unshakable. And not because nothing moves you, but because you know who you are. So,
Yeah.
Kelly, I just want to thank you for reminding us that leadership does not require us to be hard, but it does require clarity. I wrote that down. Earlier, you talked about clarity. It does require integrity. It requires kindness and boundaries. It requires grace with intention. So, to those listeners out there, don't forget that thank you note. And don't be afraid to apologize if you know that you did something that needs to be set straight. And forgive yourself and correct with care. Because basically, for us women to last in leadership, we don't have to be the loudest, but we do have to be grounded and we have to learn how to lead well. So, as we begin to close, Kelly, what closing comments would you like to leave with our listeners? What pearls of wisdom?
Sure. I recently was in a session around just reflection, and one thing that really stood out to me was the comment that the facilitator made, which is, our lives, think of your life as a journal of blank pages. And the beauty of each new day is that you have the opportunity to write a new chapter on a full blank page. So forget what didn't happen yesterday and look forward. Lead with empathy, regardless of how others are leading around you. Your EQ will definitely set you apart from most leaders.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I just want to thank you for gracing us today with your wisdom. And to those of you that are listening, just remember you don't have to be hard to be powerful. You don't have to be mean to be strong. And you can lead and still be kind. So keep walking your path, keep becoming unshakable, and always try to lead with strategic grace. So, Kelly, again, thank you. And to everyone, I'm your coach, Wendy, your purpose partner, and encouraging you to stay grounded, stay focused, and remember strategic grace will always see you through. And if you'd like to keep in touch with me, please go over to my website and subscribe, wendygladney.com, and then you can follow me on all my socials at Wendy Gladney. So until next time, God bless, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Exhale, let go, and enjoy the purpose. Partner, heartless. Podcast.